He knew he was already going to jail, so why stop killing? That's the allegation against the Virginia husband and father who reportedly gunned down his wife as well as a good Samaritan who had come to check on her. We're digging into the details of these grisly killings and what the suspect apparently had to say to police, all with an attorney who focuses specifically on these kinds of domestic violence cases. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Hey everybody, real quick, this is another Law&Crime legal alert. Did you know that children are being diagnosed with serious conditions like type 2 diabetes and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and the research is potentially linking ultra-processed foods to all this? Yeah, well, Morgan & Morgan is stepping in to fight to hold these food companies accountable. With decades of experience fighting large corporations, they are ready to stand up for the families who deserve justice. So if your child under 21 has been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes or fatty liver disease, then visit www.forthepeople.com/food or scan the QR code on screen to learn more. Okay, we have this small community in Virginia that was absolutely rocked by a double homicide that resulted in the deaths of a young mother and a family friend. Authorities with the Henry County Sheriff's Office identified the two victims as 22-year-old Mandy Coleman and 68-year-old William Leroy Morey. A criminal complaint that was filed with the court and that was reviewed by local media outlet WDBJ lays out the allegations against the suspect here, 30-year-old Joshua Coleman. He is Mandy's husband. And apparently, this is all based on Coleman's own alleged confession. Now, we really want to get a good understanding and insight into not only how domestic violence cases can go this far, but what happens next in court. And so for that, I want to bring on Texas trial attorney Anthony Osso, who specializes in this kind of law. And Anthony is going to walk through each one of these different pieces of this case with me. Anthony, thanks so much for taking the time. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So I want to dig into the suspect's mindset. I want to get into whether he is trying to go for an insanity defense with some of his actions. But first, let me lay out what the sheriff's office said happened. We go to Tuesday, July 22nd, around 1 p.m., and the sheriff's office got a report about a shooting in the Ridgeway area. Deputies find William dead from multiple gunshot wounds in the road in front of a house there. And according to WDBJ, deputies later determined that William had gone to the home on Meeks Road to check on Mandy Coleman, later encountered her husband, Joshua Coleman, who had allegedly just shot her in the head not long before. So when investigators identified Coleman as the suspect, they apparently tracked him down and arrested him within a few hours, and the couple's two young children were with him. Now here's the good news, at least physically, they were unharmed. Before I go any further into this, Anthony, talk to me about the impact on children in these kinds of situations. These children are young, reportedly 10 months old, 2 years old. Even if they didn't actually witness their dad allegedly shoot their mom, they're still going to be dealing with trauma and the after effects of all this.
Absolutely, Jesse. Severe trauma. I don't think that there's anything worse that a kid could go through, because not only did they lose their mother here, but at the hands of a violent crime like this, and my understanding also losing their father is just horrible for a kid to have to go through, live with for the rest of their life, and something that they're going to have to deal with for the years to come. So it's a horrible part of this case, in addition to the loss of Miss Coleman.
Yeah, we talk about it all the time with domestic violence cases or alleged domestic violence cases. It's not just the victim in the case, but it's also who's left behind, and the children are left behind. So we go back to this. Coleman was arrested during a traffic stop, and reportedly he had a handgun and an AR-15 rifle. Now, WDBJ reports that Coleman admitted to deputies that he'd killed both Mandy and William. According to the criminal complaint, Coleman and Mandy got into a heated argument in which he accused her of cheating on him. He allegedly told investigators he went to his room, grabbed a gun, and shot her in the head. Anthony, if that is true, if he made these admissions, why did he make these admissions? Why do you see criminal defendants make admissions like this?
Well, sometimes it really is case specific, Jesse, and not every criminal is necessarily a criminal mastermind, right? So sometimes there's no real theory or thought or intelligent mindset behind it. They sometimes feel like they have no other option, and They don't want to run from the problem, and they kind of feel like they're a dead end. So you do see that sometimes. In this instance, we can't really say quite yet why Coleman reported or at least admitted to the shooting in this case. And maybe he thought that the argument that led up to it was some sort of explanation for what he did.
Now, someone might hear this and say, okay, it's an open and shut case, that's it. The problem is that's not always true, right? Even if you have an alleged admission, an alleged confession, there are ways for defense attorneys to keep it out of trial, right?
Yes, there are. And you really have to look at, well, first and foremost, was he read his Miranda rights? If he's back in an interview room, we've got to assume that he was under arrest at that point. So there is potentially a suppression argument to be made there. I imagine that if homicide investigators have a suspect that they were be on lookout for and arrested and brought back to the investigation room, that they were smart enough to probably read him his Miranda rights. So that's probably not the defense's linchpin in this case. Would be to suppress that statement.
Mm. Okay, we go further into this. So WDBJ then reports that Coleman, quote, knew he was going to jail. So when we talk about mental health later, let's keep that in mind. Knew he was going to jail. So he decided to kill William as well and went looking for him. Now, Coleman allegedly told investigators that he went to William's home. William was gone. Turns out he was en route to Mandy's home on Meeks Road to check on her. And William found him outside and shot him multiple times. At least that's the allegation. That's according to the complaint. An arrest warrant that was reviewed by ABC 13 News says that when Coleman drove up to the home, William came over to ask him where Mandy was, and that's when Coleman allegedly shot him multiple times with his children in the vehicle with him at the time. Now, it's unclear what relationship William had with Coleman and Mandy, but investigators confirmed that he wasn't related to them, but didn't really provide any further details. Based on Facebook posts by Mandy's mom after her death, he was apparently a family friend of some sort. So Anthony, Coleman apparently believed Mandy was cheating, something her family strongly denies online. Can he claim some sort of, we talk about in the law, right? Voluntary manslaughter, right? Heat of passion. Can he claim some sort of emotional distress sort of defense?
He can. I mean, he can claim, and his defense can claim whatever they want. I think to your earlier point about his admission, Jesse, and the case being closed, I think the idea that there's ever a defense of identity in this case is sort of out the window. So he's probably going to have to rely on a specific intent issue. And I think based on the cheating allegation, I'm sure the defense is going to explore whether it was heat of passion based on potential infidelity in the relationship. So he can make that claim. It's something that the defense is definitely going to want to follow up with and investigate to see if they can substantiate what was going on.
Yeah, in jurisdictions that accept the insanity defense, I would imagine an alleged admission knew he was going to jail. That hurts insanity, right? Because the idea would be for insanity, I had no idea what I was doing was a crime. I couldn't conform my behavior to the law. The classic example would be somebody, murders somebody and then, goes outside and gardens and it's like, oh, who are you people? Why are the police here? Like, that would be the extreme example. But the idea of knew he was going to jail, got nothing left to lose, right? We take that argument, we take that allegation, that would hurt a mental health defense, right?
Absolutely. I think that would, and in addition to that, I think that his admission that they were having an argument and his admission that he had accused her of infidelity is facts that the prosecution could lean on to counter any argument about insanity and say, no, look, Mr. Coleman had a motive here. He incorrectly believed that she was being unfaithful, and as a result of that, he lost his, he let his emotions get the best of him and murdered her. So I think that there are several things that he did after the fact that really put a wrench in the defense's ability to argue insanity was at play here.
Yeah, and it's tragic on multiple levels, but the targeting of Mr. Morey, I don't quite understand that, if the allegations are true, and that hurts whatever defense he would have had, with regard to the first alleged killing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. And I'll be interested. I think that the defense, I'm sure that they're going to want to investigate into the relationship between Morey and Miss Coleman. So I think it'll be interesting to find out what facts develop through that, whether it's through text messages or telecommunications or things like that. I know he was a little bit older than she was, and I don't know that there's any indication that they had a romantic relationship, but it's very interesting that Mr. Coleman sought Mr. Morey out,
Mm.
and certainly not good for the defense case.
Right. So less than 2 hours after the 911 call came in from a neighbor about the shooting, there was this coordinated effort by multiple law enforcement agencies that led to that traffic stop on Coleman's vehicle, his arrest. He was transported to Henry County Adult Detention Center, no bond, charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of use of a firearm in the commission of a felony, 1 count of shooting from an occupied vehicle, and 2 counts of child abuse and neglect. Now, that last part there, Anthony, the child abuse and neglect, that's the children being there, right, at the scene of the crime.
Yes, that's my understanding at this point. And I think that those filings are just, they're sort of stacking the deck against Mr. Coleman. I imagine that down the line, the focal point of this prosecution is going to be on those first degree murder charges.
Let's talk about it because the murder charges, which our understanding are class 2 felonies, again, we believe it carries a minimum sentence of 20 years with a maximum sentence of life in prison. What would be some mitigating factors? What would be some aggravating factors? Some would say, the killings of any individual should be a life in prison, but why are there times that even in a case like this, and yeah, we have limited facts and a little bit limited understanding of the circumstances, what could potentially mitigate that if he's convicted of these charges or pleads guilty to these charges that wouldn't necessarily be life in prison?
Well, a number of things can be mitigating in a case like this, Jesse. And what's in a murder case, um, police aren't contemplating for these acts to occur. And so the entirety of their investigation starts after the murder occurs typically. And so it's important for them to get charges filed and to get the defendant in custody for the safety of the community mainly. But after that point, the investigation doesn't stop. And there's a lot of things that investigators can do, as well as defense teams can do, to develop additional prosecution evidence or additional mitigation evidence. And that's where we see search warrants for phones and the communications between Mr. and Ms. Coleman start to become really important. Talking to witnesses that knew the nature of their relationship and maybe knew the nature of Miss Coleman's relationship with Mr. Morey, or additionally, whether Miss Coleman was having extramarital relations or not. These are all things that can be mitigating. Additionally, it's the defense. I think that they have to have Mr. Coleman evaluated for mental health concerns, and they're probably going to want to do a deep dive into his background, which we don't know a lot about at this point, but assuming that he's gone through childhood trauma or things of that nature, that's something that the defense could present to the prosecution. But I think their best defense and mitigation is the threat or possibility that a jury could come back on involuntary manslaughter. And that's probably the stance that they'll take during the pendency of this case.
Yeah, his arraignment was pushed back from July 24th to today, actually, July 29th. Mm-hmm. And if this goes to trial, I just wonder, would the sheer depravity of what he allegedly confessed to, how does that have an impact on sentencing? In the sense, if he's not going to fight this, okay, if he doesn't really put up much of a defense, he immediately confessed, immediately gave prosecutors what they needed, could that help him in any way, or does that not negate what he allegedly did?
I think it can help him. I think if they're going to go for a heat of passion argument, they're essentially saying, look, we committed the crime of murder, but we should be punished under the involuntary manslaughter sentencing range because we acted out of passion. And so I do think it's mitigating because it goes to show that he's not a criminal at heart, and that his actions were in response to adequate cause, which is what the law requires in order for a jury to find guilty. I mean, to find true on an issue of heat of passion, that it was a response to something that was adequate. So I think that is a fact that could go towards the defendant's benefit. And I think the defense is sort of stuck with that set of facts, so they're going to have to lean into it.
I want to read something. This is from Henry County Sheriff Wayne Davis, who released a statement about this double homicide, saying, quote, "This is a heartbreaking and tragic situation that has deeply affected 2 families in our entire community. Our hearts go out to the loved ones of the victims during this incredibly difficult time. I want to commend our deputies and our partner agencies for their swift and coordinated response, which led to the safe recovery of the children and the apprehension of the suspect. We are committed to seeking justice for the victims and protecting the innocent. Now, by the way, this is an ongoing investigation, so the Henry County Sheriff's Office is asking anybody with information to give them a call at either the Sheriff's Office or by calling Crime Stoppers. What information would be valuable to law enforcement and prosecutors here, Anthony?
I think nature of the relationship evidence, fights leading up beforehand, to show sort of an ongoing, anything that could go to show an ongoing violent behavior by Mr. Coleman against Ms. Coleman is evidence that would be admissible in a murder trial, and highly relevant to show the defendant's motive in this case.
Do they conduct forensic interviews with these children? I mean, the 10-month-old is probably very tough, but the other child, is that even possible, or are they just too young?
It is possible. I think that they're selective when they do it. I'm not certain of the age of the older child. I don't think any child really under the age of 5 or 6 is someone that would be able to provide a lot of evidence about the nature of their parents' relationship. And you also have competency issues when a child of really young age goes to testify. So, but you do see forensic interviews for young children, and I think that would be important here, because any fighting about infidelity prior to the date in question is going to really attack the sudden passion, the suddenness that's required in a sudden passion offense.
By the way, how many cases have you seen where it's cheating or allegations of cheating or beliefs in cheating, valid or not? How many times have you seen infidelity being a motivating factor for violence?
It's a lot. That's the only way to put it. It's a huge driving force in domestic violence situations, and I think the bigger key that you stated earlier, key point is belief of infidelity. It's not even actual infidelity, but you see oftentimes insecurity in one of the partners, oftentimes a man, and that insecurity leads to accusations, and accusations lead to violence, and we see it all the time.
And you take the allegations as true. It's so heartbreaking to think that Morey was just trying to check up on her, right? And he was caught in the wrong place. That happens too, right? People who try to do the right thing in domestic violence situations get caught up in it one way or another. And again, still trying to figure out exactly what his role is in all of this. But it's just another element of it that's really, really distressing. Anthony Osso, thank you so much for taking the time. Really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Jesse.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.